In this video, you'll uncover ancient truths about energy hidden in a book almost no one knows, The Secret Doctrine of 1888. How ancient beings shaped reality with intention, why energy flows in cycles, and how you can align with those currents to unlock power most never touch. Before any of that could exist, before the shaping, the cycles, the alignment of energy, there was only one thing, and even calling it a thing is a betrayal of its nature. It had no name, it made no sound, it was not something you could touch, worship, or describe. It was not asleep, and it was not awake. It simply was an eternal stillness, a presence beyond presence. And yet, strangely, you may already feel like you've touched it, maybe in dreams that felt more real than waking life. Maybe in those seconds between thoughts when everything fell silent, but your body knew it was standing in the middle of something infinite. The ancient texts called it the absolute, not a god, not a force, not even energy in the way we understand it, just pure, undivided isness, a boundless field before form. Blavatsky described it not to teach something new, but to help us remember something old, something we've always carried, but never known how to speak about. You've felt this, that unnameable ache you get when life becomes too fast and your mind too loud. That longing you can't explain, the one that doesn't want a solution but craves something deeper. You've looked up at the stars before and sensed that strange recognition, not fear, not awe, something else. Like the sky was a mirror and you were seeing a part of yourself that has no age, no story, no past. That part of you isn't imagining things, it's remembering, because you came from that same eternal source, not symbolically, not metaphorically, literally, before time began, before light or matter, before even space could stretch open its arms. There was the unmanifest, whole, silent, beyond comprehension. And that unmanifest is still here, underneath your skin, beneath your thoughts, inside your breath. That part of you that never fit into anyone's definition of success or worth or meaning, that's the part that knows. When Blavatsky opened her writing with the words, an omnipresent, eternal, boundless, and immutable principle, she wasn't trying to impress. She was giving voice to a presence that can't be named, only felt, a truth that doesn't care whether you understand it. It simply is. And because it is, so are you. That's the part most people miss. We keep searching for origins, for beginnings, as if the story of life started with a bang or a divine command. But the real beginning began in a place with no beginning at all. A place so full it appeared empty. A silence so total it carried the potential for every sound, every form, every possibility. Not because it wanted to create, not because it needed to, but because stillness, when held long enough, eventually moves. And when it moved, it didn't shatter. It rippled like a breath that never belonged to lungs, a breath that stretched through non-space and gave rise to awareness. Not yours, not mine, but the kind of awareness that doesn't think, it simply is. You felt this breath, not in the air around you, but in the strange way some moments seem to swell with presence, as if the universe itself is pausing to look through your eyes. You don't need to believe in any of this. You've already experienced it. In heartbreak that emptied you so completely that something else slipped in silence so pure it scared you. In those times when you suddenly felt like everything had meaning, even though nothing had changed, that's the absolute moving through you, reminding you what you're made of. We think of creation as a choice, but from this origin, creation wasn't a decision, it was inevitable. Like the moment a still lake begins to ripple from the weight of its own potential. There were no blueprints, no gods shaping clay, just the quiet exhale of what had always been. And within that exhale, everything, matter, light, time, energy, but not as separate things, as echoes of a single pulse that began before pulse had meaning. That's what the Secret Doctrine is really about. Not just tracing the origin of the universe, but tracing the origin of your own longing. That part of you that keeps asking questions you can't explain. That part of you that feels like you were born with an ancient memory stitched into your heart. You've probably tried to explain it before. Maybe you've told someone that you feel things too deeply, or that the world feels a little off, or that sometimes you cry and you don't even know why. That's not sensitivity, that's awareness. You're not broken, you're remembering. You're carrying echoes of a state of being that existed before the mind, before language, before duality. In that place, there was no good or bad, no light or dark. There just was. And that's what you're made of. Not stardust, not flesh, not thought, but the silence behind it all. The unshaped, unspoken source that doesn't need you to do anything, just to feel. The Absolute doesn't need your belief. It doesn't offer rewards or punishments. It doesn't guide your life or write your destiny. It simply is, and through its being, you became. Not just once, not just at birth, but in every breath. Every moment you choose to listen instead of react. Every time you quiet the story and sit with the feeling underneath. That's the return. Not to a heaven, not to a truth outside yourself, but to the knowing that never left. That stillness that's been waiting under every thought you've ever had. That quiet pressure in your chest that isn't anxiety, it's memory. Parabrahman, that was the word they gave it. The ancients who saw beyond symbols, who felt this truth not in temples, but in themselves. Not a name, not a god, just a pointer. A whisper toward what cannot be touched but can absolutely be known. And now you are being whispered to. Through these words, through your own breath, through that part of you that hasn't stopped searching since you were a child. You felt it in the way time collapses when something feels real, in the way your whole body knows when you're finally hearing something true. Not because it's new, but because it's ancient. You are not separate from the source. You are not a mistake. You are not lost. You are movement within stillness, a ripple on the face of the formless. The Absolute became you not to experience itself, but because that is its nature to unfold, and you are still unfolding, still remembering, still stretching out of forgetfulness. That's what this journey is. Not learning, not seeking, just remembering what you already are beneath the stories, beneath the fear, beneath the name you were given. You came from the place before names, and if you sit quietly long enough, you'll hear it calling you back. You've just forgotten how to feel it, but that forgetting is not failure. It's the first step of return. That's why your questions have never gone away. That's why you've always sensed there's something underneath all this noise, even when the world told you to stop wondering and just accept things as they are. But how can you accept a surface when you remember the depth? How can you settle for meaninglessness when your very breath is made from what existed before meaning? You were not designed to forget forever. You were designed to wake up slowly, like a tide returning to shore, each wave bringing you closer to the memory of what you are. There is something sacred in the fact that you're even here, listening to this. Something in you refused to go fully asleep. Something kept its eyes open, even through pain, even through silence. And now that part of you is rising again. The Absolute may have no voice, but it speaks through you, in your yearning, in your questions, in your hunger to remember. You were never meant to follow a belief. You were meant to become a living thread of the boundless, expressed in form for a little while, only to return and unfold again. You don't need to be perfect to carry this. You don't need to be wise. You just need to stop running from the feeling that something ancient still lives in your bones. You are not an echo of the universe. You are the universe learning how to echo itself through human experience. And maybe that's why you've always felt slightly out of place in this world. Maybe it's not because you're broken. Maybe it's because you remember a silence so complete that even love was still undivided. And now, in this fragmented place, you ache for that unity without even knowing the name of what you miss. Let that ache be your compass. Let it guide you, not away from yourself, but into the depths of where you come from. Don't try to make sense of it all at once. You're not here to decode the absolute with the intellect. You're here to let it wash over you like a tide of remembering. And each time you return to it, even for a second, you reclaim something you never really lost. Not knowledge, not power, but being. The raw, unshaped being that existed before existence. So the next time the world feels too heavy, the next time your thoughts spiral and you wonder if there's something wrong with you, come back to this. Come back to the stillness before form. Sit in it, breathe in it. Let your soul remind your body where it came from. Not from stars or elements or biology, but from silence, from the breath that breathed everything into being without ever taking a breath itself. That is your origin, and because it is, you are whole. You always were. But wholeness is not the same as stillness, and stillness is not the same as silence. In that vast field of undivided being, there came a moment, not in time, not in space, but in meaning, when stillness stirred, not with force, not with desire, but with inevitability. Just as breath follows the pause, just as light follows the eyelids flutter before waking, existence arose from that original stillness, like the first inhalation of something that had never needed to breathe before. The universe did not begin with an explosion. It began with a breath, a sacred, rhythmic, pulsing inward and outward, silence folding into sound, emptiness giving rise to expression. This is the breath of the one life. Blavatsky called it the Great Breath, and those who came long before her called it other names still, but none of the names matter. What matters is that you've felt it. When something inside you expands for no reason, when you stand at the edge of a feeling too large for words, and your whole being swells without knowing why, that is the echo of the original motion. That is the one life breathing through you. Not metaphorically, not spiritually. Actually, you are made from that breath. You are one pulse of its eternal rhythm, and that rhythm is not random. It moves in cycles, inward and outward, becoming and dissolving, creating and resting, Manvantara and Pralaya. These aren't just cosmic concepts. They are the hidden tides moving beneath your very heartbeat. Have you ever noticed how your life unfolds in spirals, not straight lines? How clarity comes and then fades, only to return again deeper? That's not just your mind. That's the breath of the one life unfolding through you. The universe expands and contracts. Energy gathers, then recedes. Every atom in your body has obeyed this rhythm. Every thought, every relationship, every dream that bloomed and then dissolved was following it. The sacred breath is not distant. It is the pattern behind every rise and fall you've ever known. And the more you align with it, the more you stop resisting the natural flow of energy and start remembering how to surf it. This is not something you learn. This is something you remember. You knew this as a child, when you let your emotions swell and crash without shame, when you danced without choreography, when you breathed without counting. The one life was moving through you effortlessly then, but over time, the world taught you to mistrust the rhythm. It told you to fear the pauses, to avoid the letting go. It said only growth mattered, only progress. But the breath doesn't only inhale, it must also exhale. And what you release is never lost. It returns to the source, and the cycle begins again. That's the secret energy code behind everything. Your thoughts, your choices, your reality. Not a straight path, but a spiral. Not constant motion, but sacred rhythm. And the more you learn to feel that rhythm in your own life, the less you'll fight yourself. Have you ever tried to hold your breath for too long? You panic, your body tightens, your chest burns. But the moment you exhale, everything returns. Peace, clarity, softness. Your life works the same way. Holding on too long to any one state, whether it's joy, pain, belief, or fear, disconnects you from the flow. It's not your job to hold everything in. It's your task to let it pass through. You may have felt this most clearly in the quiet endings you didn't want. The moments where something good dissolved and you thought you'd lost your way, but maybe you were never lost. Maybe you were just at the end of a breath, waiting for the next one to begin. This is how energy becomes reality, not all at once, not forever, in one form, but in cycles. Blavatsky described this as the ceaseless breathing of the universe, the rising and the falling of worlds, the pulsing of light into darkness and back again. And you are not separate from that rhythm. You are made of it. You are riding it even now. Your breath is the key, not just to your body's survival, but to your spiritual rhythm. Every inhale mirrors the universe's expansion. Every exhale reflects its return to silence. And if you listen closely, if you begin to observe your breath without trying to control it, you'll notice something strange. You are not the one breathing. You are being breathed. Something deeper is moving through you, gently, constantly, with an intelligence beyond words. That is the one life. And the more you surrender to it, the more your life begins to open in the direction of peace. Most of us have been taught to fight time, to battle change, to resist death. But the one life breathes all things into being and out again without fear, because nothing truly ends. It only changes rhythm. Nothing is destroyed. It only returns to source, to rest, to wait, and then it pulses forward again. That's why you can never truly lose anything that belongs to you. It will return when the breath returns. Your deepest truths, your clearest vision, your forgotten joy, they are not gone. They are simply in the quiet half of the breath, waiting. Blavatsky didn't write this to mystify you. She wrote it to wake something dormant inside you, not the part of you that wants answers, the part of you that already knows and has just been waiting for the silence to remember. The breath of the one life doesn't need to be mastered. It only needs to be recognized. It is already moving through your life, in the timing of things, in the way your intuition pulses before your mind catches up, in the cycles you keep repeating until you learn to flow instead of force, in the spaces between thoughts, between relationships, between dreams and their dissolutions. You will find it. You may have noticed that real clarity never comes when you demand it. It arrives softly when you are quiet, when you are still enough to feel the rhythm beneath the surface. That's the breath. The inhale of new vision, the exhale of old burdens. And if you follow it long enough, it will carry you back to the source of your own being, not as an idea, but as a living truth you can feel in your bones. You don't need to believe this. Just notice. Watch how everything in your life is always arriving and departing in perfect rhythm. Even your forgetting has a place. Even your silence is sacred. There is no separation between you and the rhythm of the universe. You are not trying to reconnect with something far away. You are only learning to stop resisting what has always been moving through you. That's where energy becomes reality. Not in trying, not in striving, but in surrender, in remembering, in breathing as the universe breathes. And when you begin to live like that, your choices change. Your timing sharpens. You stop rushing. You begin to trust the pauses. You begin to feel when it's time to act and when it's time to wait. You start living as a wave, not a wall, a current, not a container. You become something softer, something more powerful. And isn't that what you've always wanted? Not control, but flow. Not answers, but peace. To stop swimming upstream and let the river carry you not toward escape, but toward the version of you that's been waiting in stillness. That's what this teaching offers. Not an escape from life, but a return to its true rhythm. The breath of the one life is not outside you, it is you. And the more you feel it, the more alive you become. Not in noise, but in presence. Not in struggle, but in alignment. And that alignment isn't something you reach once and keep forever. It's something you return to over and over, with each breath, with each falling away, and each new becoming. Just like the universe does, just like all of life. You are not here to stay fixed. You are here to move with the sacred breath. Inhale, exhale, inhale again. This is the rhythm you were born from, the same rhythm that shaped galaxies and dissolves illusions. But have you ever wondered who or what keeps that rhythm steady? What consciousness guides the unfolding of forms, the spiraling of atoms, the orchestration of stars and souls alike? If the universe breathes, then whose breath is it really? If reality moves with such intricate design, then what watches over its patterns, making sure the breath doesn't falter? The answer isn't what we've been taught. There is no bearded god seated on a throne, no divine puppet master pulling strings in the sky. What Blavatsky revealed was far more mysterious and far more intimate. She wrote of ancient intelligences, not beings of flesh, but of light, not bound by time, but shaped by purpose. They are called the Dhyan Chohans, not angels, not spirits, not metaphors, but real intelligences, builders of form, stewards of cosmic order, architects of reality. They are not above you. They are within the layers of existence, woven into the very structure of what you call matter, guiding it from behind the veil of appearances. You may have already felt them in the moments when life aligns in ways you could never have orchestrated, when beauty arises out of chaos, when healing appears from nowhere. You may have brushed against the subtle edge of their presence without knowing their name. These are not deities to be worshipped. They are the hands behind the breath, shaping what the Absolute initiates. They do not create from nothing. They reveal the pattern hidden in stillness. They listen for the pulse and build what it calls forth. Have you ever sensed that certain experiences in your life had meaning beyond cause and effect? That some events arrived not because of luck or logic, but because something greater had arranged the timing. Theosophy teaches that you are not living in a random world. You are living inside a design, and that design has guardians. The Dhyan Chohans are the intelligence behind form, and just as they shape stars and systems, they also shape you, not your personality, but the deeper layers of your being. You may not remember them, but they remember you. This is not myth, this is recognition. The part of you that has always longed to feel guided has not been naive. It has been remembering the invisible hand that shaped you, not to control you, but to protect the thread of your unfolding. These ancient intelligences do not interfere. They do not force. They align. they attune. They hold the balance between chaos and order, like cosmic musicians playing the chord that allows existence to remain coherent. And every time you've felt yourself realign after being lost, every time you found your footing after breaking apart, you have stepped back into their field. They are not separate from you. They are the intelligences of the same one life, differentiated only by function. You may think of them as higher aspects of consciousness, not above in space, but deeper in nature. They dwell in the subtle layers behind form, behind thought, behind the dance of matter. They are not here to be seen. They are here to be remembered through intuition, through inner knowing. And when you begin to trust that inner knowing, you begin to walk with them again, not as servants, not as children, but as co-creators in the vast rhythm of becoming. Have you ever created something from nothing? Written a line that surprised you? Spoke a truth you didn't know you knew? That was not just inspiration. That was alignment. The same energy that shaped the stars can move through your hands, your voice, your breath, if you let it. The Dhyan Chohans do not only build the external world, they also guide the subtle architecture of your soul's awakening. They are the invisible companions of transformation, not giving you answers, but holding the field in which you remember what is already true. Blavatsky called them intelligent forces, not because they think as we do, but because they respond to the will behind creation. They are not bound by linear time. They move through archetypal time, cycles of manifestation, cycles of meaning, and you are within their care, whether you know it or not. That moment you decided to change your life, that realization that arrived like lightning after years of confusion, that inexplicable pull towards something more, that was them, not causing, but guiding, not directing, but illuminating the path you were already meant to walk. This doesn't mean you are controlled, it means you are supported. You are not alone in your becoming. You never were, and the more you begin to sense that intelligence behind the movement of your life, the more you will understand that your unfolding is not chaotic. It is crafted, not with precision like a machine, but with grace like a poem. The Dhyan Chohans do not build walls, they open doors, they move in silence. They do not speak in language, but in symbols, patterns, inner shifts. And if you learn to listen beneath the noise of thought, you will begin to feel their rhythm in your own life. This is not something to believe, it is something to notice. And when you do, a new kind of clarity arises. You stop trying to force your way through life and instead begin listening to its design. You stop treating obstacles as punishments and start sensing the invisible wisdom behind their timing. You no longer need to be in control of every outcome. You begin to sense that something ancient is already guiding you, not to somewhere new, but back into alignment with what you already are. You begin to see that your life is not just a story, it is a construction, a temple of becoming, and you are both the builder and the built. You may not be able to see the Dhyan Chohans, but they are not distant. They are here in every moment of insight, every gentle correction, every synchronistic path that opens when you trust your deeper knowing. They do not shout, they whisper, they do not command, they hold the field. And within that field, you awaken, you unfold, you return. The universe was not built in silence, it was built in sacred order. And now that order is calling you to remember your place within it, not below, not above, but as a participant in the same divine work. You are not the result of random forces. You are the child of intention, not human intention, cosmic intention, the same intention that breathes stars into being now breathes through your awakening. And when you let go of needing to see the whole plan, when you begin to trust the rhythm behind what appears, you join hands with the invisible architects of reality. You walk the path they laid long before you were born, not as a follower, but as one who remembers the way. But remembering the way is not just about knowing where to go. It is also about knowing what you are. Because if the path is real and the rhythm is real, then the one who walks it must also be made from something more than chance. You are not simply a body with thoughts or a mind with feelings. You are built in layers, just as the universe is. You are not a single self. You are a system, a sacred architecture of being that stretches from the most physical to the most formless. This is what Blavatsky called the sevenfold nature of reality. Not 7 steps to enlightenment, not a hierarchy of souls, but a structure that lives within everything. The cosmos is built on 7 planes, each more subtle than the one before, each one holding a different vibration of the one life. And because you are made of the same substance as the universe, those 7 planes live in you too. You are not walking through the universe. You are echoing it in form, in function, in feeling. Have you ever sensed that you are more than one kind of being? That some days you live in your mind, logical, sharp, calculating. Other days you live in your emotions, soft, deep, intuitive. And then there are moments, rare but unforgettable, when you seem to rise above both, when something wordless speaks from inside you, calm and knowing, as if an ancient version of you had momentarily taken the wheel. Those are your layers. They are not moods. They are not illusions. They are the inner architecture of what you are. Blavatsky called these layers by different names: Atma, Buddhi, Manas, and others. Not to confuse, but to point towards something universal. That you are not just a person trying to awaken. You are awakening itself, happening through 7 veils of being. The densest layer is the body, the physical, the tangible, the one you see in the mirror. But that is only the outermost shell. Just beneath it lies the energy that animates you, the field of life force that moves your breath, your heartbeat, your instincts. And below that, still deeper, is the emotional layer, the subtle currents of feeling, the tides of desire, the pains that linger in silence. Then comes the mental, the structure of thought, memory, imagination. Above that is the layer of discernment, the deeper mind, the one that can step back and observe your thoughts, the one that can choose. Beyond that, there is something softer still, the soul's intuition, the whisper of truth that does not argue. And finally, at the core of it all is the essence, the silent presence that has watched all your lives pass like dreams, the pure awareness untouched by joy or sorrow. That is Atma. That is your root, the silent witness, the still flame. Have you ever felt all of these at once? Perhaps during grief, when your body collapsed, your mind raced, your heart broke open, and something deeper just watched it all unfold without flinching. Or during beauty so overwhelming you could not speak, your senses flooded, your breath slowed, and suddenly you became the moment itself. That was not chaos. That was coherence. That was all 7 layers moving in harmony. However briefly, you were not out of control. You were in truth. This is why healing is not one thing. It is layered. You can treat the body, but if you ignore the emotions, the pain lingers. You can calm the mind, but if the energy underneath is stuck, anxiety returns. Real transformation doesn't happen in one layer. It happens across all 7, slowly, gently, sometimes all at once, sometimes one veil at a time. This is why some changes feel temporary and others feel permanent. It depends on how deep the change reaches. But here's the most beautiful part. You do not need to fix all your layers at once. You only need to become aware of them. Awareness is the bridge. When you become aware of your emotions, they soften. When you observe your thoughts, they lose their grip. When you acknowledge your pain, it begins to move. Awareness is the quality of your highest layer shining down through all the rest, like light filtering through colored glass. It transforms as it passes, but it never stops being light. And this is not just theory. You can feel this right now. Notice your body, the way it holds tension, the way it anchors you. Now feel the subtle field beneath it, your breath, the sensation of being alive. Then feel what's just below that, the emotional weather you carry, quiet or stormy. Go further. Listen to the thoughts moving across your inner sky. Then rise into the watcher, the one who notices. Behind that is the whisperer, the soul's voice that speaks in symbols and quiet yeses. And behind even that, silence, stillness, presence. That is the seventh, the source, the one who holds all the rest. You do not need to believe in chakras or esoteric systems to feel this. You only need to be still enough to notice the different kinds of knowing you already carry. The way your body knows safety, the way your emotions know truth, the way your mind knows patterns, the way your soul knows when to wait. You are not lost, you are layered, and each layer has a gift, a shadow, and a doorway. What Blavatsky gave us was not a map to escape these layers, but to live within them consciously, to realize that your divinity is not somewhere above, it is in your structure. You are not trying to ascend. You are learning to inhabit what you already are, fully, lovingly, wisely, and the more you understand your layers, the more compassion you gain for yourself, for others, for the strange complexity of being human. Because once you understand that everyone is walking around with 7 layers of consciousness, some loud, some silent, some wounded, some radiant, you stop judging so quickly. You begin to see beyond behavior. You begin to feel what's hidden beneath the surface. And from that space, connection becomes possible. Healing becomes inevitable. Unity becomes real. This is not a ladder, it is a symphony, and you are the instrument. You were never meant to play just one note. You were built to resonate through all 7 layers, each adding its own depth, its own tone, its own vibration. And when you do, when you allow all parts of yourself to sing together, you become something rare, a whole being, not perfect, whole, coherent, remembered. So the next time you feel fragmented, confused, torn between 2 truths, stop trying to pick one. Instead, ask yourself which part of you is speaking. Is it the body, afraid of pain? The mind, chasing clarity? The soul, calling you toward mystery? When you stop trying to silence the layers and instead listen to them, something miraculous happens. They begin to align. And when they align, you no longer feel like a collection of pieces. You feel like a single breath moving through many forms. And perhaps that's all the universe is. A single breath unfolding itself through layers of being, discovering itself through every structure it inhabits, from stars to skin, from thought to thunder. And in that structure, in that sacred layering, you were not placed randomly. You were built with care, with symmetry, with purpose. You are the microcosm of everything. And the moment you know that, not just in your mind, but in your being, the veil thins, the path clears, the next step reveals itself. Have you wondered, what if the step ahead is also a step back into something older than memory, deeper than history, something your soul might remember, even if your mind does not. Because once you understand that your being is layered, that consciousness expresses itself through form again and again, then the question naturally arises, have you walked this world before? Not just in this body, not just in this time, but in forms forgotten by history and buried beneath myth. Blavatsky dared to answer yes, not metaphorically, not poetically, literally. Humanity, as we know it, is not the first, nor is it the most advanced. We are simply the current phase of a long unfolding, a chapter in a book whose earlier pages have been torn out of the human timeline, but remain intact in the memory of spirit. There were beings before us, races before us, not the kind divided by geography or skin tone, but root races, entire stages of human evolution, each embodying different levels of consciousness, form, and energetic potential. This idea might sound strange, even impossible, but take a breath, let it settle for a moment. Haven't you always felt that something doesn't add up, that our ancestors knew things we've forgotten, that there are traces of greatness in the ruins we barely understand, that ancient structures align with stars too precisely to be coincidence, that legends of lost lands, sunken cities, and beings of light keep reappearing across cultures separated by oceans and centuries. That's not just fantasy, it's memory surfacing. Blavatsky called these earlier humanities the Lemurians and the Atlanteans, not symbols, but real, though their reality was not like ours. These weren't simply primitive versions of us. In some ways, they were more advanced, but in different directions. Their bodies were less dense, more fluid, more luminous. Their consciousness wasn't rooted in intellect, but in intuition, inner vision, direct communion with energy. They weren't governed by technology, but by resonance. They understood things we have only begun to sense: how thought can shape matter, how sound can heal, how intention can guide energy into form. You may feel a strange emotion hearing this, not awe, but grief, a soft ache, like remembering something beautiful you once knew and lost. That's not imagination. That's your deeper memory stirring. Because if you carry the layers of the universe inside you, then you also carry the imprint of the beings who came before. Their story lives in your bones, your dreams, your unexplained fascinations. It's why you feel drawn to ancient symbols, to forgotten places, to languages you've never spoken but somehow recognize. These races weren't perfect like us. They had their trials, their shadow sides. Lemuria, for instance, was a world of deep emotional power, but it struggled with impulse. Atlantis was a pinnacle of knowledge, but it was eventually seduced by power, and so they fell, not as punishment, but as part of the cycle. Like all great breaths, they rose, they flourished, and then they dissolved, leaving behind only traces. Traces that your soul has never stopped feeling. You may have wondered why you feel older than your life, why certain places feel familiar before you've arrived, why you have dreams of floods, of stars, of temples buried under time. Blavatsky believed this is no accident. We are not just the heirs of their wisdom. We are them, returning in new forms, new vessels, to continue a work long in progress. The soul remembers what history denies. And once you start to entertain that, something shifts. You begin to see human evolution not as a straight climb from caveman to spacefarer, but as a spiral, ascending, descending, remembering, forgetting. Not a race toward progress, but a rhythm of unfolding. You are not here for the first time, nor is this the final form you will take. You are a traveler in the great migration of spirit through matter, a flicker of light moving through epochs, And the body you wear now is not your home. It is your current costume, your current vessel for a much longer journey. This doesn't mean the past was better. It means it was different. It means there is wisdom in the depths, not just the heights. And some of that wisdom still whispers in you, in your fascination with the stars, in your sensitivity to energy, in your desire to create harmony without needing to understand how. You are not learning from scratch. You are remembering through experience. And sometimes what feels like a spiritual awakening is really just an old awareness resurfacing after lifetimes of silence. These root races were not myths. They were phases of the human soul's curriculum, each one teaching a different lesson, expressing a different facet of the divine. Lemuria taught emotional purity and the power of instinct. Atlantis brought mental brilliance, vision, and downfall. Our current race, the fifth, is learning how to unite heart and mind, spirit and body without losing itself in either. And what comes next depends on whether we can remember the past without repeating its failures. So much of the chaos we experience today isn't new. It's old patterns resurfacing in new forms. The misuse of power, the disconnection from the earth, the obsession with intellect at the cost of intuition. These aren't modern problems, they're ancient echoes. And if you can see them for what they are, you can begin to break the cycle, not just for yourself, but for the entire lineage of being you represent. Because when you awaken now, you are not just healing your own pain, you are healing the karmic ripples of forgotten civilizations. You are offering redemption to whole races that lived, loved, and fell before memory began. And perhaps that is why you are here. Perhaps your soul chose this moment not because it is easy, but because it is pivotal. Because we stand now at the turning of another breath, the end of one cycle, the beginning of another. And what we carry forward depends on what we choose to remember. This remembering is not nostalgic, it is sacred. It is how evolution continues, not just outwardly, but inwardly, not just through DNA, but through consciousness, through soul, through spirit, reclaiming what it once knew and forgot. You are not behind. You are exactly where the spiral needs you. And every moment you choose awareness, every time you pause to feel deeper than the surface, you are doing what those ancient races could not. You are integrating. Integration is the new evolution, not to become what you once were, but to take the wisdom of the past and bring it into the present without the shadow. That is what Lemuria and Atlantis now ask of us, not to worship them, but to finish their song, to complete the phrase they began, to redeem the fall by becoming whole, not above, not beyond, but through. And maybe that's why this knowledge comes to you now, not through textbooks or teachers, but through resonance, through a deep internal stirring that says, this matters, that says, I remember this, that says, I came here for this because you did. And deep down, some part of you has always known, not just that there were ages before this one, but that something was lost along the way, not stolen, not forgotten entirely, but covered, dimmed, hidden beneath the weight of something heavier than memory. And perhaps you felt it most clearly in the moments when the world felt too solid, too sharp, too loud, when your skin felt like armor and your mind like a cage. That strange ache, like homesickness for something you've never seen, is not confusion. It's a clue, a remnant of a turning point long ago when spirit chose to fall into form. Blavatsky did not describe this as punishment, but as necessity. The soul didn't fall because it sinned. It descended because it had to learn, to experience, to grow. But in doing so, It clothed itself in matter so dense that it began to forget its own nature. This is the true story of the fall. Not a moral failure, but a spiritual descent. Consciousness condensing, light crystallizing, awareness folding itself into layers so tight that it began to believe it was the mask it wore. And what was once a being of breath and vibration became, over lifetimes, something solid, something separate, something afraid. But even in this densest state, something survived. A flicker, a warmth, the quiet memory that you are more than what you seem. That memory is not in your mind, it's in your being. It's what calls you inward when the world grows too loud. It's what asks you to pause, to breathe, to listen to the silence between your thoughts. That silence is not empty, it is full of return. You may have sensed that this world is not quite as it should be, that beneath the surface of life, its rhythms, its rules, its responsibilities, there's a deeper flow trying to reach you. You might have thought that was weakness, but it's the opposite. It's your strength remembering itself, because the descent into matter was never meant to be permanent. It was a phase, a necessary immersion. But like any descent, its purpose is not to trap. It is to provide the ground from which something new can rise. And now it's time, not in a dramatic, world-ending sense, but in the quiet way that truth always arrives. Something in you is ready to rise, to begin the return. The path back is not a reversal of the descent, it's a transformation of it. You do not need to reject your body, your mind, your life. You are not here to escape form. You are here to illuminate it, to bring awareness into the very structure that once obscured it. This is the sacred path, the upward curve of the spiral, where spirit and matter no longer oppose each other, but begin to merge, where the soul awakens not by fleeing the human, but by entering it more deeply, more consciously, more gently. The path back is not about rejecting the world, it's about seeing it clearly, seeing through the surfaces to the essence, recognizing the breath of the one life moving beneath every event, every emotion, every seeming obstacle, and choosing to respond not from habit but from presence. You've likely felt this shift beginning in your life, the subtle pull away from distraction and toward meaning, the loss of interest in empty noise, the growing sensitivity to energy, to truth, to beauty that isn't performative but real. These are not personality changes, they are spiritual milestones, signs that the path back has begun, that the weight of forgetting is lifting and something older is waking up inside you. Blavatsky taught that every soul goes through this journey, descent into density, then return through awareness. And that return begins when you stop identifying with the outermost layer of yourself, not denying it, but no longer mistaking it for the whole. When you begin to witness your thoughts instead of being tangled in them, when you feel your emotions fully without letting them define you, when you live in your body, but remember that it is not your limit. This is not a rejection of life. It is the deep embrace of it, but with your eyes open. It's when eating becomes communion, when silence becomes healing, when pain becomes teacher, not enemy. It's when every moment, no matter how ordinary, starts to carry a shimmer of something more. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. You are no longer seeing only with the eyes of form. You are seeing with the memory of spirit, and this remembering brings strange consequences. Things that used to excite you begin to lose their flavor. Conversations that once felt comforting now feel empty. You find yourself craving simplicity, sincerity, solitude, not because you are becoming isolated, but because your soul is making space. The path back is often marked by loss, not as punishment, but as pruning. What no longer serves your unfolding begins to fall away, and in that space, clarity grows. You begin to notice patterns repeating, not just in your life, but in your mind. You start asking different questions, not how can I win, but what wants to grow through me. Not what should I do, but what am I becoming? And eventually, the most important shift of all occurs. You stop trying to get somewhere and start remembering that you are the path. Every breath, every choice, every moment of presence. The descent into matter was not a mistake. It gave you experience, contrast, depth. It taught you how to feel, how to long, how to hunger for light in a world that sometimes forgets it exists. And now, having touched the deepest part of separation, you carry the seeds of reunion. You are the bridge between heaven and earth, between the timeless and the temporary, between what has been lost and what is ready to return. The path back is not marked by certainty, it's marked by trust. Not blind faith, but quiet knowing. The kind that grows stronger in silence, the kind that does not need to prove itself. You've likely felt it already, guiding you in moments when logic failed, holding you through changes you didn't think you'd survive. It does not shout, it does not argue, it simply knows. And the more you trust it, the more the path opens, step by step, not in front of you, but within you. This is the journey Blavatsky wrote for, not for scholars or mystics only, but for you, the one who feels both ancient and new, the one who knows the world is more than it seems, the one who came not to escape life, but to infuse it with the memory of what we once were and can be again. You can feel it before you can name it. That shift from knowing something intellectually to feeling it reverberate in your bones. It's not a conclusion you reach, but a space you fall into. A soft descent beneath the mind's surface, where the deeper structures of self begin to stir. And what you discover there is not new, but ancient. Not unfamiliar, but long buried. It's the part of you that was never confused, never fragmented, never lost. The part that waited patiently while the rest of you wandered. And now that you're still enough, quiet enough, it starts to speak. Not in words, but in presence. Not in doctrine, but in direct knowing. Blavatsky understood this kind of knowing. She didn't reduce the soul to metaphor or mysticism. She described it as a real structure, a multidimensional presence with layers, laws, and patterns that reflected the cosmos itself. This wasn't abstract theory for her, it was blueprint. She wrote of it as if describing an inner architecture as solid and elegant as a cathedral, invisible to the eye, but felt in every moment of sincere alignment. And it's this blueprint, the soul's own anatomy, that forms the foundation for everything else. Because unless you understand what you are made of, you'll always be reaching outside for what can only be found within. And the soul is not singular, it is layered. The outermost layer is the body, the part most visible, most judged, most mistaken for the whole. Within the body moves prana, or vital energy, the current that animates breath, heartbeat, digestion, motion, then emotion, a river of feeling shaped by memory, story, and longing. Beneath emotion is thought, not the fleeting chatter of the mind, but the deeper cognitive structure that organizes meaning. But thought is not the end. Beneath it lies intuition, the quiet flame that recognizes truth without needing to prove it. And at the very core, untouched by time or trauma, is pure awareness, spirit itself, radiant and formless. These are not poetic layers, they are real systems. And if you've ever felt that strange dissonance between what you know and what you feel, or between what you want and what you do, you've already encountered them. Most of us live in fragments, tuned into one or two layers, while others go ignored. We try to heal the mind while the body screams. We try to calm emotions without addressing the thoughts that inflame them. We seek spiritual insight while skipping over unprocessed grief. But the soul doesn't work in pieces. It is orchestral. To evolve, it must be heard in full. That's why true healing doesn't happen in a single practice or breakthrough. It happens when all the layers begin to recognize each other again, when the body listens to the heart, when the heart respects the wisdom of thought, when thought bows to the silence of intuition, and when intuition surrenders to something even greater, the formless presence that watches it all. This is coherence. This is integration. And it doesn't come from effort. It comes from attention, from choosing to be with what arises at each layer without judgment or hurry. You've already done this in small ways. That time you stopped running from a difficult emotion and just felt it. That was integration. That moment when you paused before reacting and something deeper offered a new response. That was the soul's architecture, becoming conscious. These aren't rare experiences. They're just rarely recognized for what they are. Signals that your inner systems are trying to reconnect. And the more you recognize them, the more frequent they become. Not because you're fixing yourself, but because you're remembering yourself. Blavatsky taught that memory was not just about the past. It was about soul structure reactivating, that your deeper layers carry knowledge older than this lifetime. And when they align, you don't just heal, you become more whole than you've ever been. Because the soul doesn't just want to feel better, it wants to remember why it came, what it carries, what it's here to stabilize, restore, transmit, and all of that becomes clearer as each layer comes online. You don't have to force this. In fact, you can't. You can only allow it. You can only listen more honestly. When the body aches, instead of numbing it, ask. When the mind races, instead of silencing it, listen for the pattern. When the emotions swell, instead of shaming them, let them guide you deeper. Because each discomfort is a doorway. Each tension is a thread leading inward. And when followed gently, patiently, they lead you to the layer that has been waiting for your attention. This is the sacred work, not to escape the world, but to return to it more fully aligned. Not to detach from the body, but to inhabit it with reverence. Not to bypass emotion, but to honor it as the soul's language. Not to control thought, but to direct it with wisdom. Not to chase intuition, but to make space for its quiet flame. And above all, to rest in the awareness that holds it all without needing to fix or fear. That is where transformation happens. Not in dramatic shifts, but in the steady unification of your inner landscape. And this unification has ripple effects. When your layers harmonize, your life begins to reflect that harmony. You make choices that feel right, not just for the mind, but for the body, the heart, the spirit. You speak words that land with clarity because they come from alignment. You feel emotions more deeply, but they no longer control you. You begin to live with integrity, not as a performance, but as a natural expression of wholeness. You don't just understand yourself, you embody yourself, and this embodiment is contagious. Others feel it, not because you're preaching, but because your coherence offers a template, a resonance that reminds others what's possible. That's the deeper service of soul integration. It doesn't end with you. It radiates. It anchors new possibilities into the field. It becomes part of how collective healing unfolds, not through grand gestures, but through subtle transmissions of presence, clarity, and depth. Blavatsky believed that the soul's design was not just personal, but planetary. that each awakened layer within us contributes to a greater unfolding, and that the more we live from this inner order, the more we stabilize a world that has forgotten how to feel. Not through activism alone, but through presence. Not through ideology, but through energy. Through the silent coherence of one human being living truthfully in a fractured time. And maybe that's what this moment is asking of you. Not to be more, not to do more, but to align more deeply with what you already are. To sense your layers again, to live from them, and to let that layered truth become your compass, your center, your offering. Because what comes next isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering the inner architecture that's already holding you, that's already whispering beneath the noise. And as you learn to listen more fully, to feel more precisely, to allow more gently, you begin to shift, not just in mood or belief, but in vibration, in structure, in soul. And that shift becomes a gateway into the anatomy of your remembering, where the layers of soul are no longer abstract ideas, but living presences you can feel, where the body, the emotions, the mind, the intuition, the spirit all begin to speak in unison, not loudly, not always clearly, but in rhythm. And when that rhythm takes hold, something ancient stirs, something true, something undeniably yours. Because the moment you begin to remember what you are, layered, coherent, luminous, you become aware of something else, a tension, a pull, a pressure that seems to rise the more you wake up, not from outside, but from within and around you, as though life itself is reacting to your awareness, as if something unseen is watching, waiting, resisting, inviting. You may not have had words for it. You may have called it stress or bad luck or fate. But what you're beginning to notice is not just coincidence. It's the movement of forces, subtle, real, and ancient. Blavatsky was clear about this. Energy is not neutral. It is shaped, directed, colored by intention. And everywhere you go, you walk through currents of influence, each one trying to shape you in return. This is not metaphor. This is not paranoia. This is the nature of reality. We are immersed in a world of energetic tension, a battlefield, not of bodies, but of will. And your soul, now reawakening, is not a spectator. It is a participant. Have you ever felt something was off in a room before anyone spoke, or been lifted by a person's presence without knowing why, or fought a pattern in yourself so deeply rooted that it felt like more than habit, almost like an inheritance? That's not just emotion, that's energy. That's the residue of choices made, repeated, reinforced. Blavatsky called it the polarity of forces, the great struggle between what she named the ascending and descending currents. Not good and evil in the way religion simplifies them, but constructive versus destructive, expansion versus contraction, truth versus illusion. And it's not just happening in the cosmos, it's happening in your mind, your heart, your daily life. Every time you try to meditate and get pulled into distraction, every time you feel called to speak honestly, but fear silences you. Every time you open toward love, but then retreat into old pain. These are not just personal failures. They are signs that your inner world is active, alive, contested. The war is real, but it's not outside you. The battlefield is your awareness, and the prize is your alignment. Because the more clearly you see, the more power you hold. And power in a universe of intention is always noticed. When you begin to awaken, you are not simply feeling better. You are becoming visible to forces that once passed over you. Some will support you. Others will test you, not to punish, but to measure. Are you coherent enough to hold what you claim to seek. This may be why your life has intensified, why the moment you found clarity, chaos followed. Not because you were wrong, but because you were right. The light you stirred began to attract resistance. And that resistance is not always external. It often rises from your own unconscious, a backlog of unprocessed fear, shame, desire, belief. Not demons in the fantasy sense, but energies that act like them. Forces with momentum, memory, magnetism. Forces that want you to stay small, stay divided, stay asleep. You've felt them. The pull to numb, the whisper that says you're not ready, the sudden exhaustion when you try to create, the voice that says you'll never change. These are not random. They are not your identity. They are energetic forms, shaped over lifetimes, strengthened by culture, karma, repetition. And every time you meet them with presence instead of reaction, you weaken their hold, you break a contract, you reclaim space. This is spiritual warfare, not dramatic, not violent, but precise and quiet and unrelenting. It happens in the invisible. It happens in your breath, in your choices, in the tiny, unnoticed moments where you choose to align with truth instead of convenience, to listen to the quiet voice instead of the loud one, to hold your center even when the world pulls you in every direction. Blavatsky warned that energy left unconscious becomes weaponized, not by malice, but by neglect. That every human is a transmitter of fear or peace, love or distortion, clarity or confusion, and that your aura, your field, your very presence becomes either a stabilizing force or a destabilizing one. This is not mysticism, it's resonance. It's why some people leave you feeling restored and others leave you drained. Why some environments nourish and others infect. The difference is coherence, alignment, purity of intention. So the question is not whether you're affected by energy. You are. The real question is, how consciously are you shaping it in return? Every emotion you feel, every thought you repeat, every belief you defend, that's energy in motion. And over time, it crystallizes, it forms patterns. These patterns become habits, fields, outcomes, and the longer they go unchecked, the more solid they seem, until you believe they are your identity. But they're not. They're agreements, and agreements can be rewritten. When you remember this, you stop fearing the battle. You begin to see it as sacred, not something to win, but something to witness. You don't have to fight your darkness. You only have to bring it into light. You don't have to erase your pain. You only have to meet it fully. What resists most is what fears the light most. And when you meet resistance with presence, you don't just disarm it, you dissolve it. This is karma, not punishment, but rhythm, not reward, but reflection. Every thought you carry sends a signal. Every emotion, an invitation, and the universe, in its silence, responds not to your words, but to your energy. This is the real spiritual path. It's not about rituals or titles. It's about becoming honest, precise, attuned. It's about learning how to feel energy without drowning in it, how to move it without forcing, how to hold your own field without closing your heart. And you are already doing this every time you choose to stay conscious during a trigger, every time you soften instead of defend, every time you pause, breathe, and reconnect to your center. You are training in the real work. You are becoming the still point in the storm. And the more you do, the more you become unshakable. Not numb, alive, present, composed, which is why the forces that once overwhelmed you begin to fall away. Not because they vanish, but because they can no longer find a way in. This is energy mastery, not as power over others, but power with reality. The kind of power that cannot be taken because it is not dependent on appearance, approval, or outcome. It is born from coherence, from alignment between your inner structure and your outer life. It does not shout, it does not seek, it simply is. And when others come into your field, they feel it. Not as charisma, as clarity, as a silence that moves through chaos without absorbing it. This is what the ancient texts meant when they spoke of the warrior of light, not a savior, not a saint, but a soul that has remembered enough to stop reacting and start radiating. And the battlefield becomes holy, not because it disappears, but because it reveals the real terrain, your own consciousness, your own breath, your own choice, moment to moment. That is the path now. That is the invitation, not to eliminate resistance, but to meet it from within, a structure that remembers what you are, not to escape darkness, but to carry light into it, not to ascend away from energy, but to shape it with care, with love, with presence. That's what it always returns to. Not more effort, not more control, just presence deep enough to perceive the current beneath the surface. Because the deeper your presence becomes, the more clearly you begin to sense that this world, this moment in time, is not just random or chaotic. It is tipping, leaning, accelerating toward something vast, something decisive. And it's no accident that you're here now, awakening just as the old structures begin to shake. The timing is not coincidence, it's culmination. Blavatsky saw this coming, not in a vague, poetic sense, but in precise and often unsettling detail. Scattered through her writing were warnings, not of apocalypse, but of amnesia, not of fire or flood, but of a quiet death, far more dangerous, the death of meaning. She wrote that the greatest threat to humanity would not be war or disease, but a world that forgets the soul. A world so entranced by matter that it mistakes the visible for the whole of reality. She foresaw a future, and we are living in it, where science would advance beyond imagination, and yet people would feel more disconnected than ever, where outer space would be explored while inner space was abandoned, where technology would mimic connection while severing it, where the mind would grow sharper but the heart duller, and where the noise of progress would drown out the quiet call of the spirit unless we chose to remember. And perhaps you felt it, that strange contradiction. More information than ever, but less wisdom. More access, but less presence. A world that can simulate wonder but rarely invites stillness. A life surrounded by stimulation, but haunted by a sense of something missing. These aren't symptoms of personal failure. They are the echo of a warning unheeded, a whisper from a century ago that said, beware a world that glorifies only the seen. It will cost you what matters most. But she didn't just warn, she also predicted something else, something quietly radiant, that when the world forgets the soul will respond. That in the darkest hour of material obsession, a wave of remembrance will rise, not from institutions, but from individuals, not from systems, but from seekers. That a new kind of human would emerge, not louder, but deeper. People who would look ordinary on the outside, but carry the memory of the stars within. You may be one of them. You may already feel it, that pull toward the unseen, that hunger for what is real beneath the noise. You may have always sensed that the world around you was missing something essential, that the answers you were given never touched the questions that mattered most, that you were not here to compete, but to connect, not to rise above others, but to return to something forgotten and bring it back into the light. This wave of remembrance is not dramatic, it's quiet. It happens in moments of intuition, in the softness of presence, in the refusal to numb or conform. And Blavatsky believed it would be led not by scholars or leaders, but by those willing to feel again, willing to look at the world through the eyes of the soul, not just as a place to survive, but as a place to reawaken. She wrote that ancient truths would resurface, not through dogma, but through resonance, through direct experience, through energy. And isn't that what's already happening? Why you're here, listening, not for entertainment, but for recognition. You don't need more information. You need to be reminded of what you already know. And Blavatsky's prophecy wasn't about events. It was about awareness. She saw a time when humanity would rediscover that the laws of spirit govern even the physical world, that consciousness is not a byproduct of the brain, it is the root of all form, and that when we align with that truth, we stop being passive observers and begin to co-create reality again. But she also cautioned, the longer we delay this remembrance, the more painful the correction becomes. The more deeply we root our identity in matter alone, the more fragmented we feel. And that fragmentation expresses itself as anxiety, burnout, division, violence, not just personally, but globally. These are not random breakdowns. They are the cracking of a structure that was never meant to stand alone. A world without soul cannot sustain itself, and yet the return is already underway. And it begins wherever someone like you chooses to go inward rather than react outward, to pause instead of perform, to question not from cynicism but from sincerity, to wonder, to listen, to remember. That's what changes everything. Not a new philosophy, but a new state of being, one where energy is not just understood but felt, one where silence becomes a source of strength, one where your presence alone becomes a transmission. This was her true prediction, not a disaster to fear, but a responsibility to accept that the future of the soul depends not on some grand event, but on quiet awakenings multiplied across hearts and minds, not all at once, not perfectly, but steadily, gently, like roots growing in the dark, preparing to bloom when the world needs them most. And maybe that time is now. Maybe that's why you feel so sensitive lately, why you can't pretend to care about what used to matter, why you crave stillness without knowing why. These aren't signs that you're lost. They're signs that you're aligning. You are not behind. You are simply responding to the call that Blavatsky said would come, a call to reclaim what the world forgot and to hold it with humility, not pride, with depth, not drama, with love, not fear. And even though you may feel alone in this, you are not. You are part of a network, an invisible web of remembrance, connecting those who feel before they know, who sense before they speak, who walk this world with eyes that see through the veil. And though you may never meet them, you will feel them. You already have. And each time you choose truth over performance, soul over strategy, you strengthen the current. You reinforce the prophecy, because the future she saw is not something you wait for. It is something you become. And it begins not with belief, but with willingness. Not with certainty, but with sincerity. Not with grand acts, but with the simple choice to be present in a world that rewards distraction. Every time you choose stillness over speed, honesty over image, depth over distraction, you realign the field around you. You become a node of coherence in a time of fragmentation. And that coherence spreads, not through force, but through resonance. It touches others in ways you may never see. It reminds them softly that something more is possible. This is what Blavatsky meant when she spoke of prophecy, not prediction as entertainment, but prophecy as invitation, a call to become the future rather than fear it, a chance to embody what others have forgotten. You may not feel ready. You may think you need to be more healed, more certain, more prepared, but that feeling of unworthiness is part of the illusion. The truth is, you've already begun, just by being here, just by listening, just by caring enough to ask deeper questions. The seed has already taken root. Now it grows through your life, your choices, your presence. And that presence will not always look dramatic. It may look like patience, like kindness, like saying no when it would be easier to say yes, like walking away from what no longer resonates, like trusting your body when your mind wants to override, like choosing to feel even when it hurts, like showing up as yourself, especially when it feels vulnerable. These are not small acts. They are the foundation of a new world, a world where soul is not theory, but practice, where the sacred is not hidden in temples, but lived in kitchens, sidewalks, late-night questions, and early morning clarity. Blavatsky saw all of this, and she didn't ask us to follow her. She asked us to listen to the same source she listened to tune into that still voice within, the one that doesn't shout but knows, the one that reminds you who you are, even when the world tries to make you forget. And that voice, it's speaking now, not in grand declarations, but in the quiet recognition that something in you is ready to carry the flame forward, ready to live by its light, ready to become the very future you've been waiting for. Not in a single moment, not through a final revelation, but through a remembering that keeps deepening, widening, until it becomes the way you breathe. And by the time you recognize that you've become it, you realize you always were. Because this is not about discovering something new. It is about allowing what has always burned within you to take form. That hidden warmth you've carried for years, that quiet flame that flickers when you're still enough to feel it. That is not imagination. That is your role beginning to stir, your part in something ancient, deliberate, and alive. Blavatsky didn't write to impress, she wrote to ignite. She knew that truth, when heard at the right moment, doesn't just inform, it activates. And the truth she carried wasn't hers alone. It was a transmission from a source older than any single tradition, a whisper from the Absolute itself, carried through symbols, stanzas, and silence. And it said this: you are not random. You are not here by accident. Your soul was shaped with intention, and the structure of your being is part of a greater unfolding that includes galaxies, lifetimes, cycles of creation and rest. You may feel small, but you are woven into something vast, and not just passively. You are not a spectator of this plan. You are a living thread in it. What you choose, how you respond, the way you hold your energy, it ripples, not metaphorically, but truly. Subtle fields shift because of your attention. Invisible laws bend around the presence you bring. When you suffer in silence and still reach for compassion, that matters. When you speak truth without performance, that shifts something. When you embody stillness without retreating from life, you anchor something others can feel, even if they don't understand it. You may not be praised for it, you may not be seen, but in the invisible layers of this world, your alignment is a lighthouse. Your healing is a pattern breaker. Your attention is a bridge. And slowly, gently, you become a stabilizer, a carrier of what was forgotten, a reminder of what is real. And the more you live this way, not as performance, but as presence, the more natural it becomes. You stop needing external proof because you begin to feel it in your own nervous system, in your dreams, in your timing. Something starts to flow, not ease without challenge, but meaning without fragmentation. You move in rhythm with a deeper order. That's the real sacred plan. Not a script written in stone, but a living field of possibility shaped by conscious presence. And your soul came here not to follow it blindly, but to co-create it by embodying the very energy that keeps the plan alive. When you align with clarity, the plan strengthens. When you withdraw from illusion, the plan clears space. When you choose integrity in moments of conflict, the plan recalibrates. You are not separate from the design. You are part of how it reveals itself. This is why you felt pressure. Not because you're failing, but because you're being called. Not to save the world, but to inhabit it more truthfully. To stop waiting for permission to be what you already are. To trust that your sensitivity is not weakness, it's your compass. That your longing is not dysfunction, it's direction. That your pain is not shameful, it's transformational. Every part of your experience, even the ones you thought disqualified you, has been shaping your flame, not dimming it, refining it. And that flame is not a metaphor, it's structure. It's energy configured in you from the beginning, hidden beneath the surface, waiting until your life had carved just enough depth to hold it. You may have sensed it as a child, in those moments of wonder, of silence, of sorrow, too vast for your age. You may have felt it flicker during crisis, a strange clarity inside the chaos, a voice that didn't speak in words, but simply knew. And now, slowly, it's returning, not as drama, but as warmth, as strength that needs no explanation. You've seen the world try to strip people of this inner fire, to dull it with shame, to distract it with noise, to seduce it with roles and labels and endless striving. But the flame doesn't die. It waits. And if you're still here, still seeking, still feeling, then it's because yours never left. Not really, it just needed time. And now you're remembering not just what it is, but how to live by it. That's what it means to serve the plan. Not to become someone else, but to become more deeply yourself, your true self, stripped of the masks you never agreed to wear. It means allowing your thoughts to align with truth, your words with resonance, your actions with coherence. It means being willing to pause when others rush, to stay present when others numb, to choose depth where others skim. Not because you're better, but because something in you knows this is the way. And the more you live from that knowing, the more the world begins to shift around you. People respond differently. Time stretches. Synchronicities emerge. The right words come. The right silences deepen. You no longer feel like you're pushing upstream. You're flowing with a current older than time. The plan is not somewhere in the distance. It is right here, in this breath, this moment, this choice. And when you make it from the flame within you, something ancient smiles. Blavatsky wrote, "The Secret Doctrine, not to impress scholars, but to awaken initiates of a deeper kind, not those trained in ritual, but those prepared by pain, by wonder, by the sheer strangeness of being human and still sensing more." If you've followed this far, it's not because the words were convincing. It's because something inside you already knew. You didn't learn this, you remembered. And that memory is not over. It's just beginning to live through you. Because this world doesn't need more noise. It needs more flame. Not loud, but steady. Not dramatic, but real. It needs people who walk softly, but radiate something clear, something old, something beyond belief. It needs you, not in a perfected state, but in a sincere one. Not because you have answers, but because you are willing to be the space where answers come. That is your role. That is the flame. That is the great plan in motion. And you are part of it, right now, exactly as you are. You always were. Even in the moments you doubted, disconnected, turned away, forgot. Especially then, because forgetting is part of the rhythm too. The pulse of contraction before the expansion, the pause before the breath returns. And when the return comes, when the inner warmth stirs again after silence, it's never a punishment for having wandered. It's a reunion. And the soul doesn't measure how far you strayed. It only responds to your willingness to feel again, to return inward without needing a reason, to say yes without certainty. You may not see the effect of this. You may never know who was shifted just by your steadiness, who found courage just by your calm, who felt something ancient rise in them just because you dared to live a little more honestly than the world asked of you. That's the strange gift of soul work. It ripples far beyond where you can witness, but that's also its grace. It doesn't demand recognition. It only asks that you stay close enough to your own flame to let it live through you. This is why your quiet choices matter more than you think. Why a moment of patience or softness or restraint isn't small, it's sacred. Why choosing to feel when it would be easier to numb is not weakness, it's mastery. Every time you do, you're not just healing yourself, you're giving the world a new pattern to follow. You're writing a new law into the field. You're remembering for all the ones who forgot. And maybe that's what you came here to do. Not to impress, not to teach, but to remember so that others might feel it's safe to do the same. Because what you carry isn't just yours, it's ancestral, it's cosmic, it's tied to lineages and timelines and lifetimes you may never fully understand, but your body remembers, your soul remembers, and every act of presence, every time you choose coherence over chaos, you're not only shifting your own path, you're realigning threads that stretch far beyond you. Your remembering becomes part of a collective repair, a reweaving of something that was frayed but never broken. That's why it hurts sometimes. That's why it feels heavy, confusing, or isolating, because the truth of what you are carries weight, not in burden, but in density, in significance. You are not here to float above life. You are here to infuse it, to ground spirit into form, to bring the unspoken into words, the unseen into presence. And that takes time. That takes care. That takes a fierce kind of tenderness. Blavatsky knew this. She didn't write to entertain or to please. She wrote to awaken. Her work wasn't polished for mass appeal. It was encoded, layered, alive. It wasn't about being understood by the intellect. It was about being felt by the soul. And those who could feel it, really feel it, would recognize what was being stirred. Not new knowledge, but ancient memory. Not answers, but alignment. She saw through the veil. Not just into the realms beyond, but into the distortions here. How easy it would be for truth to be repackaged into ideology. How quickly essence could be lost in imitation. And she warned of that. She wrote not only to guide the sincere, but to protect the flame. To safeguard what was sacred from the grasp of ego, empire, and shallow ambition. Because she knew the work is subtle, the power is quiet, and the moment it becomes spectacle, it begins to erode. This is why she emphasized inner law over outer form. Why she insisted that the sacred cannot be franchised, that the soul's awakening doesn't need a title, a ritual, or a stage. It needs integrity. It needs a willing heart. It needs a presence honest enough to say, I don't know, but I'm listening. And that's what you're doing now. That's what this moment is. Not the end of a lesson, but the beginning of a deeper listening. Because if you really pay attention, if you soften just enough, you'll notice that something is moving through you even now. A pulse, a warmth, a sense of yes that doesn't come from logic, but from resonance. You are remembering, not with your mind alone, but with your entire system, with your breath, with your stillness, with your ache. And that remembering is not passive, it's transformative. It shifts what you attract. It shifts how you respond. It reshapes what reality offers you. You begin to see things differently, not because you try to, but because your lens has changed. What once triggered you now teaches you. What once frightened you now challenges you to go deeper. What once felt separate now feels connected by some invisible thread. You're not escaping the world. You're becoming more rooted in it, with clarity, with coherence, with a kind of strength that doesn't need to defend itself. And that's the mark of true remembering. Not certainty, but stability. Not ideology, but intimacy with what is. You stop needing to convince others because your life becomes the expression. You stop needing permission because you realize you were never waiting. You stop seeking identity in roles because you're too busy embodying the real. Not perfectly, but honestly. And that honesty, the willingness to be with what is without flinching or performing, that is what anchors the sacred into the everyday. You don't have to burn sage or chant mantras to do this. You just have to be awake in your moment, awake in your breath, awake in your choices. That is the ritual. That is the offering. To walk with your whole self, even when it trembles. To speak with your whole voice, even when it shakes. To hold the contradictions, not as problems to solve, but as portals to deeper coherence. And as you live this way, something changes. Subtly, yes, but undeniably. You stop feeling like a guest in your own life. You stop waiting for something to begin. You realize it already has. The flame is already lit. The plan is already in motion. And you, just by choosing presence, are a vital part of it. This is what Blavatsky was pointing to. Not a destination, but a way of being. Not a system, but a remembrance. And it begins again and again, exactly as you are. That's where it always began. Not after the healing, not once you feel ready, but in the middle of the mess, the ache, the reaching. When something stirs, not loudly, not clearly, but enough to make you pause. Enough to make you look inward, not for answers, but for orientation. And in that pause, you feel it. The warmth, the pulse, the thing beneath the thinking that's been waiting for you to remember. Not change, just remember. And the remembering isn't loud. It's not even clear. It's more like a shadow behind your thoughts, a breath between decisions, a pulse you didn't realize was always there. You try to name it, but it doesn't fit language. It doesn't need to, because it's not asking to be explained. It's asking to be